Okay, this is part 11, and we left off where we were talking about the beginning of like the first, I guess, like empires. Or like, well, he calls them eras of history. So we left off with the first Olympiad, which was one of the first like Greek city-state archipelago, I guess, cities. The foundation of Rome, we went over that, and then the era of Nabonassar, who was the first Chaldaean king, or Neo-Babylonian. Both it's the same thing. So just a bit of a refresher. So we'll start right here. The commencement of the reign of Diocletian is determined by the observed and calculated eclipses to be in the year of 80 to 84. So they recorded an eclipse in 280. Well, okay, so they figured out that based on an eclipse they recorded that it was in 284 AD. I'm just like throwing that out there. The beginning of the Great Sothoic period of 1641 Sothoic or vague years, equivalent to 1640 Julian years, is fixed about the year of 1321 or 1325. So, I think when they're saying, so I looked this up, and I think when they're saying that Sothoic, they're talking about, they're talking about down here is what I'm going to read. So, during this great embolismic period, the first day of the Egyptian year, called Thoth, from the omission of the intercalation of the quarter of a day in each year, recedes through every day of the year, till it arrives at the point whence it originally started, and again coincides with the heliacal rising of the dog star. The Sothoic or vague years refers to this like intercalculation of the quarter of a day in each year. So like there's 365 days that we have, and then we also have like a leap year every 4 years, and that leap year every 4 years is like it's like a fraction of every year. So basically the solar year is like 365.25 or something days. So every 4 years, right, they add 1 day to like kind of offset that whole calculation of the like time. So it's saying here that the Egyptians, right, when they say Sothoic, they're saying they're using the same, like, I guess we're calling it the Gregorian calendar, which was introduced by the Pope, I think. Or, well, I don't really know. But that is like a reverence to the Egyptian calendar, where they have the 365 days, but they don't have that intercalculation, or intercalation is what they say in this book, of the quarter of a day in each year. So that's how they pinpoint some of these things, is they use like an event that they talked about, or like, they see like right here with the heliacal rising of the dog star. So I'm not too well versed in astronomy, but I kind of like look some of this stuff up because I didn't want to come empty. I'm trying to stop coming empty-handed sometimes to these kind of videos I do, because sometimes I just end up looking for stuff too long, or I go off on too much of a tangent. But I kind of want to be more objective when I'm doing these. So because there's like 400 pages on here, so getting through that is going to take forever if I don't like just kind of speed it up a little bit. So this is the next paragraph. Having thus brought down the ancient history of the world as contained in the fragments to the times of the Grecian record, I shall endeavor, in like manner, to trace a faint outline of its theology. From Babel, the center of their abominations, the heathens carried off the same objects of adoration, the same superstitions superstitious observations, and the same legendary tales which, however varied and confused, may without difficulty be identified throughout the world. So I think that's when they're talking about, like, all the same stories are the same throughout the world, and they figured that out in the 1800s, right? But then, like, I don't know. I guess our academics don't recognize that at all. I really don't know why, and I don't know why it's like that. It's very strange. But part of why I made this channel is because, like, those ideas don't get shown in our academics, which it needs to be. So I like to kind of like dive into some of these books that have those kind of like theories, and a lot of those books actually end up being like from this time period, is the 1800s, like this whole Egyptian craze during that same time, because the late 1800s was like when, you know, they started uncovering a lot of Egyptian stuff. Everything was fresh. I actually have like an actual book from the 1800s about Egypt and Assyria when they were uncovering like stuff like Ashurbanipal's library, Aswan and Abydos, and looking at all that stuff there. It's I keep it in like a little Ziploc bag, and I mean, I don't really know how to preserve these books all too well, but yeah, I just hold on to it. Really, really interesting, honestly. I need to get a digital copy of it. Maybe I'll read it on here sometime in the future if we get through this book and some other books as well. Among the pastoral tribes, the Scythic doctrines almost universally prevailed, yet in subsequent times they also fell into idolatry. Okay, so that's like just, when they say idolatry, I think they're just saying it's just like a form of corruption that happens, or they just kind of, it's not necessarily what you, when you conjure in your mind, just like idol worship and like, oh, you know, it's all demon, or whatever you like kind of like conjure up in your head. But I think what they're saying here is just like they took only certain parts of the doctrine, whatever they had, and they like fixated it, or like just rejected some and then kept the others, and then that's, I guess, maybe that's what they're referring to when they say idolatry. But I mean, I could be wrong, of course, but that's kind of what I'm seeing or understanding, is when the corruption happens, it's usually because some leader or group decides to just like kind of reject some like texts and then accept only certain other ones, or even create their own. So that's just something to keep in mind when we're looking at this. And honestly, I don't really know what Scythic doctrines they're talking about. I'm assuming, like, I know a lot, or, well, excuse me, I hardly know anything about, like, Scythian mythology and stuff like that. I know it's kind of like, oh, shoot. I had somebody show me a video of it, and I kind of forget, but, I think it's almost kind of related to Norse. I don't know, maybe I was just kind of reading a really different version, or maybe a more modern version of it, but I think they have like a lot of I'll have to take a look at it honestly again. But when they say Scythic, well, we could just look that up right now. So before we continue, let me see. So what are Scythic doctrines, and is that would that refer to their mythology and their legends? Because, like, the only thing I think in my head, honestly, when I think of, like, the Scythic area, like, today at least, is, like, Khazaria, or Kazakhstan. And then I just think of, like, what is it, the Khazarian Judaism groups? Like, the people that were, like, kind of like Russian Jews and stuff like that were, like, in Eastern Orthodox and, like, kind of like in Russia. I think there was, like, some, groups that lived in there that were, practiced Judaism, so I get that kind of mixed up with what's going on, or what was there before, because I really don't know how. I think it's Celtic. Okay, I think that's what I intended to think of, maybe instead. So let me see what ChatGPT says. So, they're nomadic Indo-Iranian people. Yeah, that's we know that. Let's see, the religion are deeply tied to Indo-Iranian traditions. Polytheism, yeah, god of war, Ares, Papaios, it's a pretty cool name. A sky god comparable to Zeus. Api, the earth goddess. And okay, yeah, so it's kind of just kind of like pantheon, typical, I guess, pantheon, stuff like that. But I was thinking it's more close to Celtic. But I mean, I guess, I mean, looking at like from like a more panoramic, panoscopic point of view perspective, I mean, all these pantheons are kind of like the same a little bit, I would say. They're just like kind of like, you know, reminiscent of each other, one another. I don't know which is older, honestly. Like, I mean, I don't want to go too much into detail about like the whole, because you could just dive into this forever. But it's interesting to see what people said back then because they had more access to the information, I'd say, directly than we do now. Everything's kind of like tour. There's less kind of like independent archaeology, and then like kind of reports on it, like there is today. I don't know. Today it just seems kind of like you gotta get the license and the permits, and then like everything's kind of like on rails. You know what I mean? I don't know how to explain it, but it's like you can't get off the rail and kind of like see stuff on your own. You'll get in trouble for it. Just, I don't know. It's just interesting to look at. It's like, why not look at it? You know, why not go off the rail if there's more? You know, why stay on the rail? I don't get it. Excuse me, I'm drinking some coffee. It's a little bit late. Okay, so we were at the idolatry. Yeah, while the Ionic nations carried their additions and corruptions to such a length. So when they say Ionic, I think they mean the people of Ionia, I want to say, and that's like Turkey, and that's like a really old land. And if we're to like say like the people like Mount Ararat and stuff like that, and that there was like a great flood, and it was like, you know, like the Hebrew texts say that like in the Old Testament that, you know, Mount Ararat was where Noah had landed and all that stuff. If you were to kind of like go off that perspective, that's like in Eastern Turkey. So Ionic nations, if they're saying this is a really old, you know, form of their traditions and stuff like that, and ways of survival and living and civilization and whatnot, Ionic would kind of like, it's consistent with Ionia and like how old it is, and you know, but it's just they kind of make a disconnection between like the Greeks and the Phoenicians, or well, not necessarily the Phoenicians, but I'd say the more like Canaanite Proto-Phoenician groups, maybe, because the language kind of evolved into like an alphabet, but they at some older point in time they had the same text. Like the Hittites, they had like the same cuneiform text as like the Akkadians and stuff like that, and it was all same cuneiform stuff. But it changed after some time period. You know, like other stuff, you get the modern like Phoenician alphabet and stuff like that. You get eventually you get Aramaic, and then I guess like Hebrew, and then early Greek. You know, once they say like in the 700s and 600s BCE, you kind of see that, I think, what they're trying to say. If we refer to the beginning of the video. Okay. The Ionic nations carry their addition craft to such length that the original and more simple doctrines became obliterated among the vulgar. And I think they're saying that, like, yeah, like I was saying earlier, the people that were kind of like instilling military might or using it for the wrong reasons, they'd be considered vulgar and kind of, you know, kind of just purge the doctrines and stuff like that, and like our history and whatnot, and were retained only by the philosophers and priests, and sometimes were even re-imported from abroad. The more elaborate corruptions of Ionism appear to have prevailed originally in the Iranian territories only, and to have passed to India and to Egypt, and to have spread themselves with civilization over Greece. Okay, let me break this down real quick. The more elaborate corruptions of Ionism appear to have prevailed. Okay, that's consistent. So that maybe this is saying like this is like Sumerian and stuff like that, and like this is like the earlier like Hittite groups and stuff like that, and this is how they settled, and they had the oldest type of knowledge over there in like the Iranian territories and all the way from like Mesopotamia and kind of Turkey. It's just all because I mean the evidence is there, man. You know what I mean? Like they have the cuneiform there. If you look at I think Ionis Tepe, Ebla, Abu Simba. Those places have, I think, cuneiform, if I'm not mistaken. And it's like inscripted on some of it's inscripted on the walls and whatnot. Those are like kind of close by Turkey. Now, in the heartland of Turkey, like in Ionia, I can't really confirm that. I haven't really dug any too much deep into that myself. If there's like cuneiform dug, I mean, I can ask, but ChatGPT. But I mean, I don't know, I guess well, let's check it out. But let me see. Were there any cuneiform found? Excuse me. Found in Turkey. Let's see. It's like glitching out. It's like asking me for like which response do I like more. I'm gonna cancel that and just kind of send it again. What the heck, man? It's like, well, let me refresh it. I don't know what the heck happened. Yes, numerous cuneiform inscriptions have been found in Turkey, Hittite, Assyrian, and Akkadian periods. Most significant sites include Kultepe, ancient Kanesh, the most important source of old Assyrian cuneiform tablets in Turkey. Okay, so let me look this up. So let me go to Google Maps. Let's pop this bad boy out. Let me go to Turkey. How do I left click? Okay, so if you guys want to follow along, we're like in the Middle East, right? So I'm gonna go a little bit towards Turkey, and Turkey's right next to Greece. So if you know where Greece is just below the boot, the Italian boot. Everybody knows the boot, right? So if you look to the right of the boot, there's Greece. You look a little bit more to the right, it's Turkey. And Turkey, they say, is like the oldest period. So if we're looking at Kanesh, let me look at Kanesh or Kultepe, but let me type in Kanesh first, maybe. Kultepe, Kanesh. Okay, yeah, so this is kind of in Ionia, but not really in Ionia. Ionia is more closer to Greece, but yeah, this is like smack dab in the middle of freaking Turkey. Permanently closed. That's what it comes up on Google Maps. Kultepe. Under military occupation. Alright, next one. Just real quick, I just really want to confirm that for myself. Samuha. There may be Kayali Pinar. That's like the same thing. Kayali Pinar. And then of course I spell it wrong. Right. Yeah, it's just right next to It's literally like just to the left of Kailash or Kultepe. Fascinating. Very, very, very fascinating. So, Samuha has newly excavated Hittite site with cuneiform inscriptions. Holy snap, dude, that's crazy. They're just like finding more stuff out there. That's actually nuts. Welcome to 2025. Guess what they're gonna find next. Alright, anyways. Very interesting stuff, honestly. That really just kind of sealed it for me that, all that stuff is really preserved out there. Like, look at it. I mean, this is, if we just Ionism, right? So that's definitely referring to like Turkey. I don't know where else it could be. Like maybe somewhere by the Black Sea or Caspian Sea, right there. But I mean, I'm saying it's Turkey, 100%. And like it's saying it was like originally it prevailed in the Iranian territory, so they kept the tradition in Iran and that sort of area in like east of Mesopotamia, right? And so there was originally kept there, and then to have passed to India and to Egypt. So they're saying there's a migration period that went into those lands, and then to have spread themselves with civilization over Greece. Yeah, that makes sense too, so. And then subsequently, so after the whole Roman world. So this is like a slow migration. I mean, that's kind of like a generic way to put it. Like if they're just saying that like, oh yeah, these groups like slowly like parasited their way in, I guess, if that's what they're referring, if that's what they're implying. By foreign conquest and other circumstances, the two systems were often amalgamated into one. The more elaborate and corrupted form of Ionism and idolatry would catch the attention of the casual observer as the religion of the land, while the deeper doctrines, which retained much of their primitive simplicity, were wrapped in mystery and communicated only to the initiated. Well, that sounds pretty Masonic, if you ask me. Alright, so we're at like 22 minutes right now. Most nations in the process of time became more attached to particular parts and retained but fragments of the general system, but it is still in existence and preserved almost entire both in its Scythic and Ionic form. Okay, hold on, let me break that down a little bit. So let me think for a second. In existence and preserved almost entire both in Scythic and Ionic as the Buddhism and Brahmanism of Hindustan. See, like, I don't know what it's implying here. Like, is it saying it's like a parallel, or is it like a direct parallel, or is it just like a common motive that happens in history, in ancient history? I don't really. Like, it's saying that, like, this dichotomy of, like, Scythia and Ionia parallels to Buddhism and Brahmanism of Hindustan. I don't know, I guess we just keep reading. Because it seems like if we just keep reading, we just find out more of what he's saying. But then, sometimes we just gotta slow down because it's like, and then you slow down and it's like, oh, you gotta keep reading. It's just how I keep saying it is. There's a little bit more coffee for me. By comparing all the varied legends of the West and East in conjunction, we may obtain the following outline of the theology of the ancients. It recognizes as the primary elements of all things two independent principles of the nature of male and female, and these, what the heck, I accidentally right-clicked, my bad, and these in mystic union as the soul and body constitute the great hermaphroditic deity, the one the universe itself consisting still of two separate elements of its composition modified, though combined in one individual, of which all things were regarded but as parts. Okay, well, this is all just kind of like mysticism. From the two, or more frequently from the male, proceeded three sons of hypostases, which, when examined severally, are each one and the same with the principle from which they sprung, but when viewed conjointly, they constitute a triad, emanating from a fourth yet older divinity, by who a mysterious act of self-triplication becomes three, while he yet remains but one. Okay, I'm not really sure what they're saying. This seems like mysticism to me, but I would say that, like, maybe something like this would not make sense if somebody were looking at, like, I don't know, Greek mythology. I'm just saying it doesn't make any sense either, because that's what it seems like to me. It just, I don't know. The member of the triad being ultimately resolvable into the monad. And I think the monad is... See, Father, at length upon this subject. Oh, Faber. The monad. Oh, that's something that... That's like the... it's just like the universe. I think it's just a way of saying the universe. That's how they said it back then. But, I mean, I don't really know what he's trying to say with all this mysticism. Like, what kind of... what does this have to do with the history? I mean, you could just kind of... Like, you can just kind of put any analogy together and just kind of make it sound interesting, but, I mean, what is he saying, you know what I mean? I don't understand. Like, by a mysterious act of self-triplication becomes three, while yet he remains but one. Like, it's not very... It's really, mystic and cryptic, and I'm not really sure what he's really trying to say there. I don't know if it's some, like, Freemason stuff, or I don't know what the heck that is, but whatever. With this is connected the doctrine of a succession of similar worlds. At the conclusion of each revolving period, the world is dissolved alternately by flood and fire, and all its varied forms and parts are absorbed into the two primeval principles, which then remain in the loveliness of their existence. After a certain interval, the reunion commences, and with it the reconstruction of another world. As before, the first production of this world is the triad, and the same heroes and persons reappear, and the same events are again transacted till the time arrives for another dissolution. Such was the system in its original form, but it was a foundation of materialism upon which was raised a superstructure of idolatry. Alright, well, if anybody can make sense of that, you can leave a comment. I really don't know what this stuff is really trying to say. This is all just, it just seems like too much mysticism for me. It's not very explicit and very concrete with its display of history. It's like, I don't know, I feel like it's just trying to explain something. It's trying to explain like a nature, like a law of nature. Like, oh yeah, this is a law of nature, when, you know, it's a law of nature that things split from 2 to 3 and then 3 to 4, and that's all it's making sense in my head as. But I think I actually do want to end it here and then continue forward. But if we're just taking a peek here, it kind of seems interesting. You know, we get past all this strange mystic jargon. So we'll continue here. The most remarkable feature is the multiplicity of its gods. Alright, yeah, it'll be interesting for the next part. We can go into detail about that stuff maybe. So